All right, we are live, and
Yay!
I'm really hoping that everyone can hear us this time. I did a little bit of tweaking in OBS, so hopefully that fixed the audio errors we were having in the other stream.
Yeah, let's see if it works. So the
Yeah,
problem
guys,
was...
please let us know in the chat if you can hear both of us. We had a bit of an error with nobody being able to hear Natalia, which
Yeah.
that's very bad because this is Natalia's
Yeah.
class.
we needed this to work. I wonder though if it's the same link. Is this the same link to the...
No, it'll have to be a second link. Yay! It works! Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for helping us troubleshoot
Yay! It
this.
works.
You guys are awesome. So we're getting started a little late, but okay, Natalia, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself so we can fully test it and start over.
Okay. So my name is Natalia Batista. I am a manga artist, and I am the creator of Sword Princess Amalthea. And I have the books here because we're gonna talk about stuff that I want to show you in the books, such as reactions and sound effects. Yeah, and UK is gonna show us some Japanese books, so we can talk about Japanese sound effects as well.
I am.
Nice.
I just rated my bookshelf for a little a select sample, so you guys are going to see my manga
Nice.
tastes here now. So we're gonna talk specifically about sound effects, that kind of thing. It's incredibly important in a visual only medium like comics to be able to tell the readers kind of atmospherically what they should be hearing. You know, if this was actually a movie or whatever, what it would sound like in their heads. It's going to be really, really important for helping people get into the mind frame. So why don't we go ahead and get started? And of course, as always, if you guys have any questions along the way, drop them in the chat. I will let Natalia know. We'll go over your questions. And as usual, if you have a question after the live stream's over and you think, oh man, I wish I'd asked that, you can go ahead and send us an email. You can send it to Kae at TOKYOPOP.com, and I'll make sure we pass it along. And of course, for all the previous classes, we've had 7 of them now. You can go to TOKYOPOP.com/Manga Masterclass. That will have links to all of the other videos. We'll have some of the sketches that Natalia's done, some of the little scripts that she's written out, some extra little fun things, and of course, when we come to the end of this series of classes, it will have details on the contest we are going to be running. We'll talk a little bit more about the contest at the end of today's session, but in the meantime, Natalia, take it away.
Yeah, so we've been talking through all these episodes, these lessons about different steps in making comics, and up until this lesson, a lot of it is very similar when you do manga as when you do any kind of comic from any part of the world. But in this lesson, we're going to talk about a little bit more manga-specific stuff. So this lesson will be kind of a marking in stepping over to the manga part. So you could actually watch all of the other videos and don't care about the fact that we're talking about manga. You can just say, okay, this is comics, because making manuscripts and character designs and storyboards, all that is similar in the same kind of process and the same tools and techniques you use. But when it comes to especially this part, reactions and sound effects, that's when you have a little bit more of it's a little bit different. You need to think a little bit. There's different things, and we're gonna talk about that today. So first of all, why we have all the mangas here is because my first recommendation before we start the actual lesson is that always when you do your own manga, make sure you have references close by. And this is very important when you talk about the reactions and sound effects, because this is when you pretty much can, I don't recommend you to copy poses or like how a sequence in panels that is too close to copying or tracing. So I don't recommend you to trace or copy that close to another work. But when it comes to sound effects, copying how someone draws a sound effect, that's not really an issue. People don't take an issue if you copy how other people do sound effects, and people don't take issue if you copy how someone draw a funny face, a reaction, because there is usually kind of like it's not a small number of them, but there's a number of different facial expressions and reactions that are very common in manga and that people reuse, and it's kind of like an internal joke or a gag that manga artists do together, and we all use the same kind of facial expressions. And this is especially in these kind of chibi characters that you can see sometimes. I don't know if I have any here that I'm gonna show, but my recommendation is that when you work with your own manga, is that always keep a manga book or a couple of manga books close by. And if you don't know how to draw, for example, an angry face, just flip through the book until you get to a spot where someone is angry, and then you can look at that face and you just copy. Let's see if I can show you, and you just copy how that face looks, and that is all right. Like it's all right to copy like how things is positioned. You still want to use your own style and make it in your own style, but copying how eyebrows are angled or how the mouth is shaped or where you put certain markings in the face, that is all right. Like you can do that, and that is also very appreciated because manga is a very minimalistic technique, artwork or art design technique, and this kind of minimalism means that what we try to do as manga artists is portray in very few lines, very quickly, portray a feeling, emotion happening.
Natalia, I'm sorry to interrupt you just a little bit here. Your connection is a little glitchy on my side.
Oh.
It's kind of cutting in and out a little bit.
No, this is not good. Let's see. I'm just gonna double check I'm on the right one. One moment. Emil? Snor du för mycket av internet? Okay. I think that's pretty much what I can do. I am on the high quality version of my internet.
We will make do the best we can.
Yeah. This is a tricky day.
If you guys are having a hard time understanding, or if you miss any details, feel free to speak up in the comments, and we'll definitely make sure that we clarify for you. I'm picking up enough that I can figure out what you're saying, so hopefully that's
good.
Okay, yeah, today is not a good day. Today is not a good day.
No, it's very, very tricky. So I would recommend, for example, if you have a trouble, just flip through the book, find some face and draw that. And that can also be an exercise in itself. And just sit and just read through manga, and just when you find a cool face or funny face or something, just draw it, just quickly. Only the facial expression, the reaction. You don't have to draw the hair or the design of the character or anything. Just easily draw the facial expression. This is from Undead Messiah by it's by Gin, right? Gin Zarbo.
Gin Zarbo, yes.
Gin Zarbo, yes. And if you just flip through it, you can find some cute face or cruel faces that you want to copy, just to like learn how to draw different faces. So that's one thing I recommend you to just practice from manga. And that's also why you need different kind of mangas, because if you practice from one, you're gonna see how it gets very limited. But if you practice from different, you're gonna have a very broad personal library of facial expressions.
Yes.
Second of all, make this personal library of funny, cool facial expressions and sound effects. This is something I recommend you to just do in general when you're in the beginning of your learning curve. Just practice drawing facial expressions and especially sound effects. These can just be copied from different mangas. I don't recommend you to copy too much of character designs, because You don't want to become a copycat. So make sure you copy from different mangas. But when it comes to facial expressions, like I said, it's all right to copy right away, because that's how a lot of people do when it comes to the funny facial expressions, for example. And because there is a limited, there is, I'm going to show you how to do different facial expressions and how to do them in varying strength or force, how strong the emotion is. But in the end, it's all about collecting those different facial expressions and learn from it. So now we're going to talk about reactions and facial expressions. So that's what's like a segue over. First of all, my first tip. This is the one of my most appreciated exercises I do with young kids when I do my manga workshops. I call it the smiley table. So I make like this kind of table that you can have in like when you do statistics, or you just like you work with math, but we're gonna make a fun table. So up here, I'm gonna make different smiley faces, but I'm gonna make them with different eyes. So this is angry eyes. And as you can see, I'm just gonna make them as smiley faces. And let's see. So this one is angry. This one is surprised. As you can see, I don't draw the mouth, I only draw the eyes. This one is a little bit scared or sad. This one is a little bit curious or questioning, maybe. And on this side, I'm just gonna draw a different mouth. I'm gonna skip the heads. I'm gonna draw a happy mouth, angry mouth with teeth even. I'm gonna make a like surprise mouth, and maybe this kind of duck mouth, what they have sometimes in manga. And you just can collect different mouths and different eyes. And now we can combine them. So I'm gonna make the first row here, all of them with happy mouth, but with different eyes. So we're gonna make the, let's see, we have the happy, but with the questioning or suspicious eyes. We have the sad or the I don't know, worried eyes. We have the happy eyes that are just lifting, and we have the angry eyes. And you can see how just having the same mouth but different eyes, you can have a different feeling. And if you just keep doing this on every level, and you can just continue with like every time when you read manga and you find a funny facial expression, break it down into mouth in one line, and the eyes up here in the top line, and then you can add them. Like if we flip through mangas, I'm gonna flip through. I'm gonna see if I can find something in Camel, for example. Some funny face here. Let's see if they have some funny chibis or faces that I can use. That would be nice to keep. Yeah, we have, for example, this one is quite nice, because this is a character that is smiling, and you can see there's a small smile, and then the eyes are closed. So we're gonna add that. We add the eyes up here. It's gonna be closed eyes, and the eyebrows is a little bit upwards like this. And we're gonna add the mouth down here, and it's like a small, like oval, a thin oval. So we can add that to our shapes. We have an open mouth and this kind of eyes. You see, there's a different facial expression. We add it with the angry mouth and this kind of eyes. Different facial expression. You can see how like different, depending on where they end up in this kind of table, we have different facial expressions. So this one's gonna be fun. Something like that. And you can see, you can just continue like this. And this one is something that I really recommend you to try out at home and to work with, because learning how to do different facial expressions is all about learning emojis. But you can just keep on making different emojis depending on how you combine these two parts. Like think about the mouth and the eyes as two different parts. The the reason why we divide it into the mouth and the eyes is because these are the expressive parts of the manga face. That's why when you draw these kind of chibi characters, you usually erase the nose, because you can't see with the nose. You can't see if the person is happy or sad or surprised. You just see it through the mouth and eyes and eyebrows. So this area and this area is what we're interested in, and that's why we make combinations like this to make different facial expressions. And you can just continue making this table. So this assignment, this exercise, is one that I recommend for you to do and practice facial expressions. And yeah, that was the first assignment. The second assignment that I recommend you to practice is when it comes to manga, we have if we break down what manga is a combination of words, pictures, onomatopoeia, which is sound effects. They are not like words, because words in dialogue or in text bubbles, text blocks, they are depicting, they are telling us a narrative. They have full lines or full sentences, while onomatopoeia is more about expressing sometimes those sounds that you can't even put into words. Like sometimes it's a sound that is really hard to put into words, but it's important to convey the feeling of for the reader to be in the place, in that situation, and feel like they are there and they can hear these noises and the sounds in the situation, in the place where this takes place. But it's one more thing that actually manga uses that is not used in other comics as much, or even sometimes not even, and that's another part. So we have 4 parts in manga. We have the words, which is the dialogue. We have the art, which is the figures. We have the onomatopoeia, the sound. The sounds. And then we have a fourth, and this is very manga typical. And actually, I don't have a word for it, but I would call it emotional visual elements, like visual elements, emotional. And these are things that are very typical to manga, and you know them. Sweat drops. We have the
got the bulging vein thing.
The bulging vein. We have the lines that is going vertical on the face, or horizontal, depending on what kind of feeling, emotion you want to have. You have the blush. You have this kind of blushed circles.
You have the nosebleed, the name of your publishing studio in Sweden.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And these kind of things are they are depicting something else. And that's also, I think, a lot of the times why when some people read manga, they start reading manga and they have a trouble understanding these kind of. That was when I started reading at 14 or 13 or something. I was like, what are these small stuff in the faces? Or like, it took some time before you get accustomed to these kind of this special emotional visual elements, which are not common at all in Western comics. Or like, and the only comic I can remind myself that I've seen it in is actually Spirou. It's Spirou and some Franco-Belgian gag comics, like comedy comics. They usually sometimes add some stars around the head when you hit your head, or some kind of like some symbols when you're angry and stuff like that. But that's the only place where I've seen it. In manga, it's that, but much more. So we're going to talk a bit about this kind of emotional visual elements. And I want to show you some of them. So of course we have, for example, we have the sweat drop. The sweat drop is usually close to the head, up on one side. And the sweat drop is when the character is kind of thinking that something is embarrassing or tiresome or obvious. So it's kind of usually combined with a face that is either like this or more excusing, maybe. No, I didn't do that. So the sweat drop is very common. You can also add sweat drops just in the face if the character is more, really like angry about something or scared about something. You can also add sweat drops in the forehead like this, but that's more realistic sweating. So these ones are more comedy or slapstick, while this one is more related to maybe real emotion, like a dramatic scene or an action scene or something like that. So you can see the difference also. We have the typical horizontal lines when you have a character that is maybe very angry or very distressed. You can have this kind of horizontal or vertical lines like this. Uh, it depicts a shadow in the face of the character. So it's like a shadow going down from the forehead and down, and kind of making everything dark. And it's to depict how the character is getting angry or frustrated. Sometimes you can also have it when the character is also like combined with this one. You can also add these lines to kind of strengthen the feeling of kind of embarrassment or feeling like you need to disappear. So that's also used. Sometimes you also use it just on the cheek like this. So you can combine them, like the sweat drop and the lines, you can combine these. And that's why I recommend you to read a lot of manga and make this library of emotional visual elements that I'm talking about. We also have the this kind of small explosion next to the head. That's typical when a character notices something or realizes something. You can also use, instead of this kind of explosion, you can have sweat drops jumping off the head like this. And that's typical for when the character is nervous and realizes something or is surprised by something. You can also use that, for example. What more? We have this kind of, like you said, this bulging vein, usually
Yep.
also in the forehead, close to where you have veins, so forehead or on your hand. So it's not on your cheek because you don't have veins,
Yes.
visual veins in your cheek, but you have it up here. And you don't have your visual veins so much here, but you have it on your hand. So that's why they usually focus on places that you can actually see your veins. That's important to depict as well. So some characters can have it when they kind of clench their fist like this. They can also have it on their fist like this. If
We
they
actually
clench
have
the
a
fist.
question here
Yeah.
from Irish Lover 7745. Do you use exaggerated expressions on the characters any different from traditional cartoons? I think that's kind of what we're going into here. What Natalia
Yes.
is explaining is a lot of these are manga specific. You wouldn't see
Yes.
these in a sort of an American comic. You might see something similar, but these are. I'll give you guys an example here. As a Brit who moved to the U.S., you see a lot of people doing a peace sign, like this. Um, and when I went to Japan, I saw a lot of people doing a peace sign like this. And it took a long time for me to get over the gut instinct of that's really offensive, because in the UK, that specific gesture meant something different. Um, these are very similar in the sense that they're emotional cues that are, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
shorthand, linguistic shorthand for an emotional cue,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're going to mean something different depending on your where you're from and the language you speak and such. So these are very well known in Japan. They've started to become more well known in the West as manga and anime have gotten more popular.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still very, very different from Western comics and
Yeah.
cartoons in that sense. But if you look at something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, they took a lot of
Very
cues
anime
from anime.
inspired. Yeah.
Yeah, they took, that's what kind of makes that feel more anime, because they took a lot of those little cues, the sweat drops, the bulging veins, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing, and put them into an American cartoon, which made it feel like
Yeah.
this kind of blend of the two.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to answer one more question real quick here from Hermit. Yes, Tokyopop is still around. I am not just some crazy person pretending to be Tokyopop on YouTube. We are still around. You don't have to miss buying manga from us. You can still buy manga from us. If you go to tokyopop.com/manga, you can see our current catalog, all the stuff that we've got available right now. So yes, definitely check it out.
Yeah. And so there's more of these, and I recommend you, and I'm just gonna go through the most common ones. Of course, there's a lot more, and I recommend you to do that library of images from manga. Just sit and just study manga. And my recommendation is to both copy facial expressions and also these kind of emotional visual elements that I call them, because it's not really facial expressions. Like the lines are or something different. You can, for example, you can put these lines on a character. You can even put them on, like I've seen them put on like objects as well. For example, if a teacup is being spoken badly about, you can put a sweat drop on the teacup if you want to. Like the teacup can have emotions as well. It doesn't have a face, but it can still have this emotional element. Another one is that you can have this kind of horizontal lines, and that's typical for it might look like I'm gonna make it again, like if the character is blushing, so we're gonna make it's not a blush. If the character is blushing, let's say the character is really happy and it's blushing, in manga you make the blushing like these kind of diagonal lines like this. But when you make them almost horizontal, like they're almost laying down, this is not blushing, it's more angry blushing. So that's a little bit of a nuance, and it's something that is good to learn. So this is blush, and this is anger. Anger. Angry. So this is different. And also you can add this angry, this anger you can add all over the nose. And if the character is really angry, maybe screaming in the middle of a fight, you can even add it over the top of the nose as well, all the way up to the forehead, even like this. And the lines are still quite horizontal, but they can cross over each other, almost like cross hatching. We're going to talk more about cross hatching in future episodes or future lessons. But you can add like almost like a darkness in between the eyes. You still want to keep the eyes clean so you can see the facial expression, but by adding darkness around the eyes, you're going to make the character seem a lot more frustrated, angry, scary, to be honest, very scary. So that's another one. Let's see if we have some more. I have like a sheet note that I'm checking. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the most common ones.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's probably several more, but these are some of the most common ones, and it's all about learning how to use them. Don't just put them in because they are manga-ish. You have to learn this language as well. Just like you have to learn how to draw a certain pose or write a dialogue in a certain way. Write dialogues. You also have to learn how to use these kind of emotional elements, and that you learn that by referencing. So check the references for that. So that was the second. The first one was the smiley table exercise. This one here, that was the first exercise. This one is the second exercise, just finding them. And then I also want to talk about when you do these kind of emotions, you have to think about the strength of the emotion or the feeling or emotion you want to depict, because that depends on how you make the facial expression. So here, for example, we see a happy character. We see a more happy character. The difference between this is that the mouth is a little bit bigger, the eyes open up, the eyebrows is even more raised. And then the very happy character is so happy it like pinches the eyes and screams with an open mouth, and the eyebrows are really high up. So you can see how this is like step 1, step 2, and step 3. And learning how to kind of control the emotions, how you depict an emotion, and knowing when when is the character a little bit happy and when are they very happy. So this is just 3 steps. It could actually be much more steps. Like we could even have a small smile, or just like a shy smile. You could have like happy in much more different stages. It's just 3. You can have many more. So that's another thing I recommend you. Another assignment or exercise I recommend you to do is to pick one of the emotions. You can use, for example, your this facial expression table that you did. Just pick one of them and just like, okay, I decided I should do this one. How should I do this in different stages? So now we go over to this one, and we had it was the sad eyes and the angry mouth, and we're gonna do that here. So first of all, we have the sad eyes, like this. So this is the sad eyes, and then we have an angry mouth. So this is the first step, and this is, we're gonna erase the eyebrows even more. We're gonna make the eyes a little bit more wimpy and sad, and then we're gonna make the mouth even angrier, and maybe add these kind of teeth, or like angry teeth. And now we're gonna make it even more. So we're gonna have this one, and we're gonna make maybe the eyes even more scared. Like you see how I open up and make the kind of the iris and the pupil pretty small, and that's a good way to make the eyes look bigger. And then we have this big mouth. So you can see how I used this facial expression from our table, and then I decided to make it in 3 steps and make it 3 different strengths or levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3.
We actually have someone has pointed out that number 3 there is the origin of the emoji that people draw online, where they do like an X and a capital D, and it looks like the really big smiling face, and that's exactly where that came from.
This one.
And we actually have a question for you from Two Frame Studios. What are your favorite stylistic expressions to use, Natalia?
Wow.
Like, what's one that you love drawing that you just think is really fun?
I would actually say it's really fun to draw people really mad, like having these kind of horizontal lines, and like, because when you do them, a lot of the times when you do the other ones, they are pretty flat, and they're supposed to be flat because they're supposed to be usually on chibi characters or very cutesy characters, and a lot of them, like the sweat drop, they flatten the face out. But these kind of horizontal lines, there's a difference in that, because the horizontal lines are usually used. So I'm talking about, let's see if I can find them. These kind of horizontal lines here, these ones here, when you're angry. So I usually you can see them in a lot of action comics or dramatic stories when characters get really mad or angry, or like building up towards an attack, and that's why usually they are a little bit more realistic. So you actually shape them around the body, like around the nose and cheeks. So you have to learn a little bit about 3D, the 3D effect of your characters. How big is the character's nose, and where does the cheek turn, and stuff like that. So don't just draw horizontal lines and think that that's enough. You have to learn a little bit about the 3D shape. And that's why I like these kind of angry lines, because they are a little bit more of the 3D feeling. I think they add a lot of depth to the character. But also I like this sweat drops and the vertical lines on the side. That's also very common in my comics. A lot of people feel like, ugh, this is so embarrassing, or this is so annoying. I do that a lot. Especially Amalthea does that a lot.
I was going to say, especially Amalthea.
Yeah, she there's a bunch of times where she thinks that Ossian, the prince that she finds, that he's really annoying. Like here's, for example, when she's supposed to kiss him, and you can see up here she has like a small sweat drop, and then she's like, oh no, I have to kiss him, and then you can see these kind of horizontal lines in her face. I don't know if you can see it, but she has some of these horizontal lines in her face. They're pretty fun to do as well. Yeah, this one, for example, when she's like, oh no, and you see these horizontal lines, a shadow in her face here.
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't want to do that. So yeah, they're pretty fun, I would say. So yeah, doing this is a good step to learn how to kind of strengthen or weaken the emotion depending on the scene. Because that's one thing I really, 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 a very important tip from a pro to you. Don't draw the same face every time the character is angry. You have to learn how to raise the volume and lower the volume and know when to do that. Because when you know, if you watch a movie, for example, and the actor is overplaying all the lines and speaking very dramatically, you start thinking this is a really bad actor, and then you get like thrown out of the magic of the movie. You're not there, you're watching a movie, you feel like this is boring, this is a bad movie, and you don't want to have that feeling when you're reading a manga. So the trick is to never overplay or underplay. Think about the volume of the emotion, like how much or how little should I depict it. Is this character angry, very angry, or very, very, very angry? Like what kind of volume should I have on my character's emotions? This is very important because I've seen a lot of new manga artists that are very good at drawing manga characters, but they don't know how to keep this volume in the right check. They haven't learned the emotions of the character they're creating. So sometimes they are making the character very overly dramatic in a scene because they think, okay, the character is angry, so I'm gonna draw them really, really angry, and that's too much. So learn how to use that the volume of the emotions. Yeah, and another one that you can another assignment or exercise that you can do is learning how to do body movements, combining them with characters' facial expressions. So if we have a facial expression here, that is, I'm gonna draw a very simple character. So this character is, for example, happy, like happy and standing and a little bit like satisfied or smug even, maybe even a little bit smug, so we even do one of the eyebrows like this, like this character is a little bit smug. So what would be a good pose for this character when doing it? A good pose would be, for example, maybe arms folded, for example. That would be a good pose, I think, for this facial expression. So learning, and maybe, yeah, straight back, maybe even one leg to the side like this, and one like a very confident pose like this. This would be a good pose that match that facial expression. If we have another facial expression over here, someone that is like scared maybe, and maybe even like very scared and sweat drops. Now, a good pose for this character, the body language would be a little bit more hunchback, like maybe keeping the hands up like this, holding their hands like this because they're a little bit afraid, and leaning like a little bit forward, like trying to like hunch a little bit and not take too much space. Maybe even the knees are bent. The character is very like insecure or afraid of something. So this would be a good body movement for this facial expression. So you can see how if I would, for example, switch them over, you would see how it wouldn't work. So I'm gonna try to switch them over. If this facial expression was like this instead, it wouldn't work. It's not the same. And the same one over here, if we did this one really afraid, it's not the same. It's not the same.
It
so you can
loses
see
its
how
impact.
it loses its impact, and it also has no function. Like the thing with the body movement is that you should also strengthen or like turn up the volume or add some more drama to it. So even if this was like a frame like this and you wouldn't see the legs, you would still feel like these characters depict different emotions, because not only the faces but also the movements. If we did the same, if we had, for example, the same here, the same facial expressions. So I'm gonna copy this one and just reuse it like this. But I'm gonna make them without any special Like they're just gonna stand in this frame. So they're gonna have arms at the side like this, like many people draw in the beginning of the comic. Which ones of these one would be more fun to read?
Mm-hmm.
I would say this one has a lot more emotion compared to this one, which is quite boring. So this one is good, and this one, nope, don't use it. So by depicting not only the facial expression, but also the body movements and arm movements, and kind of thinking what kind of body movements and arm movements would this facial expression, would this character have when they have this facial expression, this reaction. So remember that the reaction is both facial but also body. This is boring down here, but this is more fun up here. This is more interesting to read. Yeah, that was about reactions. Let's talk about sound effects instead.
Yes.
So those were the exercises. I'm just going to go through them quickly. The exercise was, first of all, this kind of smiley table. Do that one. Second of all was these kind of facial, facial emotional visual elements, as I call them. There must be a word for this, but I haven't found it yet. Yeah, in Japan there might be a word for it, but they're not that common in Western comics, so that's why we probably don't have an English word for it. We should just come up with a word.
And we'll put just for you guys, we'll put all of these little like exercises to go away and do. We'll put them up on the website as well, so you can find them all there. You can find the images and the kind of instructions on how to best use it. So don't worry if you don't remember it exactly when you sit down to do it. We'll have it all there for you.
Yeah. And the next one exercise, the third one, is to learn how to raise or lower the volume of the emotion. And this one is
we lost
fourth one.
I lost all of that. I did not hear a single word of that. Can you go over that last one a second? That just got very garbled.
Okay. So the third one is to learn about how to raise or lower the volume of emotions, to have different levels of the same emotion, and learning how to raise and lower it. Learning when to do that, it's more about making comics and making a lot of them. But learning how to do it in art, in your art style, that's the exercise you should do. And that was the third exercise. And the fourth exercise is learning how to add the body movements or arm movements to enhance the emotion and reaction that the character has. That's about reactions. Let's talk about sound effects.
Okay.
Yeah,
I love sound effects are so important in all manga, and it's something that I know new creators get very excited about sound effects, particularly using them in Japanese. But I think it's really important to go over. They bring out so much in your comic.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that with the language. So I see a lot of young aspiring manga artists that they read a lot of manga, and especially they read Japanese manga. Japanese manga, in the beginning, when they started importing Japanese manga to the Western markets, a lot of the publishers removed the Japanese sound effects or added the American on top, which was a lot of work. And after some years, they learned that, the readers doesn't care. They really want to have the Japanese sound effects. So nowadays, it's more common that you have the Japanese sound effects and maybe an English translation on top of it or next to it somewhere. And
well, keep in mind as well, when we first brought manga across to North America, because Tokyopop was one of the first companies that did this, we had that big discussion about, well, these books read backwards. They read right to left. What do we do? Are people going to even, will people understand this, but will people even buy this? Are they going to be interested? Well, maybe we should flip the whole book just to be sure, well, now all of your
Yeah.
sound effects are backwards. So that was a big reason why a lot of the initial sound effects were removed, was because of that. And of course, that created all of its own new issues, you know, because now suddenly Sailor Moon is now left-handed rather than right-handed, and so on and so forth. And thankfully, that era did not last very long. It was a great solution at the time, but it's changed a lot now. But you're correct that now people want to see a lot of the original sound effects in these, and they just want the little translation next to it where it's relevant.
So there was even I know in Sweden they published the Blade of the Immortal manga, and that was a big issue as well, because at some point they flipped it, and I know that they flipped it in America. They tried to publish it in left to right binding, and the problem is that the main character in Blade of the Immortal, he has the sun's symbol on his back, which if you turn it over becomes a swastika. So that means they had to first they turned all the pages the wrong way, so right to left, and then they had to turn all the frames where you see his back. They had to turn those as well, which was a mess.
Yeah, it creates all these issues. It's funny because Two Frame Studios said, "Can people read right to left?" and laughed. And I'm gonna tell a little quick story here. When we were at conventions, we will have little kids come running up to our table who are like, "Oh my gosh, it's manga! This is great!" And they'll start picking up books and flipping through it. And their parents will come over, pick up a book, and just get so confused. And they won't know how to do it. And I'll sort of explain to them, yeah, it reads the other way around. You know, you just pick this up here. This is the page you start from. And they'll have no idea. But we'll have a kid that will come up that won't know what manga is. We'll pick up the book, open it backwards, go, turn it back around, open it the right way, and go, oh. And then they just start reading it. They figure it out like that. They're so quick to figure it out. So yeah, I found a lot of older people, I think because they're so used to reading books left to right, get very confused with it. But if you've been raised on a steady diet of manga, like say myself and Natalia, it's not confusing in the slightest.
Yeah, and like the thing with manga is that there's so many steps for a Western person, for a person who's used to reading left to right. There's not only the reading direction, but also these kind of the art style, the black and white, which is not that common here, and of course these kind of emotional visual elements that we talked about, the reactions. There's so many things to kind of accept or get used to. So I think you have to be very open-minded, and you have to be. I noticed that the younger they are, and also sometimes if people haven't read comics before, they are more okay with manga than if they have read comics, because if they have read comics, they're trying to apply the same rules on manga as you can find in other comics, kind of comics, and it's not the same rules. So they're like, this doesn't look like Tantan, or this doesn't look like Superman. Yeah, because it's not.
Exactly. It's totally different.
Yeah. So that's why when we come to sound effects now, the thing with sound effects is that even though Japanese manga have the Japanese sound effects, I still want to talk to you guys about why should we Westerners, if we aim to make our manga for a Western audience or a non-Japanese speaking audience, don't use the Japanese sound effects. Like, for real, there is no reason to do it. I see a lot of manga artists that do. Unless your manga will be published in a Japanese magazine, don't do it, because there's no use to. And there's several reasons to why you shouldn't use the Japanese sound effects. First of all, unless you know Japanese by heart, you've lived there, you've read a lot of Japanese manga in Japanese, there is a big chance that you don't know what sound effects should go where. And I have seen examples of Western artists, non-Japanese artists, using sound effects totally wrong, like almost using English words, translating them directly phonetically to Japanese and then inserting that, which is mumbo jumbo, as no one will understand it. So it's really weird.
I have to bring in my favorite example of a misused sound effect here, and this is flipped the other way. This is a Japanese manga artist who made a sound effect in English. He's a little small-time manga artist. You guys might not have heard of him. His name is Akira Toriyama. He did this little niche manga called Dragon Ball back in the day, and if you have a copy on your shelf, I wish I still have mine. I don't have my copy of Dragon Ball anymore, but issue 1, volume 1 of Dragon Ball, there's a moment where Goku and Bulma and I think Oolong, they get in a little speedboat and is speeding along, and the sound effect for the speedboat is boat across an entire page, and it is my favorite thing in the entire world, and it doesn't make any sense, and that is an almost perfect example of that kind of thing. Is obviously he wasn't sure what English word to use. He wanted to use an English word because it would look really cool, so he just wrote boat.
And remember, that's how Japanese people will think when a Western person don't knowing how to use a Japanese sound effect, when they try to do it and it's wrong, it's gonna be just weird, very weird. So my recommendation is, unless you very much understand Japanese and very much understand the Japanese onomatopoeia, which takes a lot to learn, you can learn it. There is several dictionaries online, and if you aim to make a manga for a Japanese magazine or from a Japanese contest, and they want you to use sound effects, try to go that way. But I recommend you to then do a lot of research and double check. That's going back to the references, have your books ready, read the books, check the sound effects in the book, and do that library of Japanese sound effects. So you have some examples. Can we look in your mangas?
Of course.
If you show some of them.
I went through my shelf and I picked out a few different examples here. This is from here we go. I'll pull this up here. This is from Delicious in Dungeon, or Dungeon Meshi. This is you can actually get this in English. I highly recommend it. It's a very fun series. But I'll show you guys. Here we have a dragon, and we have the sound effects, the zun, zun, the very heavy sound effects of the footfalls. And then over here we have gang, 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 because this guy's banging really hard on a pot to try and get his attention.
And that one is one good example. If you take that gang, gang, if you zoom in, put it up to close again. The thing with that one, you can see how the important thing with sound effects in Japanese, we're going to focus on the Japanese first, because that's pretty much how you should model the Western later on, is that, for example, these ones, you can take it down if you want to. So the thing with, you know, that a lot of the Japanese lettering is very graphic. It's not like in a word in Japanese, for example, like gan, for example, is ga. This is hiragana. Well, I know a little bit of this is gan in hiragana, and if you want it in katakana, you can have it like this, gan. So this is very, like, this is ga. So very many times in Japanese, it's each of their symbol is both it's two letters. It's vocalizing both a consonant and a vocal. Well, what's the? Yeah. Well.
I'm trying to think of the word now. Now I can't remember the word for it, but it's not spelled out alphabetized. It's essentially, it's phonetic. It's a phonetic language. So
yes, and that means that, and that means that when we, for example, would say in English, would say maybe boom when something explodes. In Japanese, they would say don. This is do, and this is n. So in Japanese it would just be two symbols, but in English it would be 4 at least. If you wanted big boom, maybe you even have boom with like several O's like this over a page. So that's why in Japanese it's a lot about placing these symbols. Usually it's very few of them, at most 3. Or if you have a 2-letter or 2-symbol word like doki, for example, you can repeat it doki doki. That's when a heart is beating. Ki is like this, doki.
Yep, there you go.
And then you can have like doki, double doki doki. That's when the heart is beating. So that's like, a heart is beating like this. But still, it doesn't take so much space. In English, you would have to have all the letters, and that's why when you do Japanese sound effects on a page, if you have, for example, a frame, like we had the dragon foot, for example, if we have a foot stepping down or like heavily stepping down like this on something, we can, for example, to elongate or make the effect even stronger, you can have the foot. Maybe, for example, would the pata or bata be one? Could you have like this, for example? Let's see if I have the right lettering. This bata.
Bata
that
is
work?
if it's very delicate.
Or maybe pata, even if it's a small step.
Yeah.
This is I don't know. But let's, for example, say that this could be a sound effect. This is why you shouldn't guess. I'm just guessing
I was
now.
going to say this is an excellent demonstration of what we were talking about earlier. If you're not sure, don't do it.
Don't do it. Well, for example, if you have, for example, let's say this sound effect works for us, by placing it, like you see, on different sides of the actual subject. This is a subject in the middle, and I'm placing it different sides. We can make it stronger or elongate the wording. On the opposite, if I would do, for example, if I would instead have a frame where someone grabs something, pick something up like this, or like grabs the hold of like a rod or something. And one word you would say for grabbing something in Japanese is gabu. Let's see, gaba, could I, or gab? How do you say boo? Okay. This wasn't good. I shouldn't.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know how I can show it to you from here per se.
This is boo, right? This is
yes.
boo.
There you go. You got it.
Boo. Yes, gabu, for example. And putting them together means it's faster. I can even add a small su, which is a way to even make it even faster. All this is about Japanese onomatopoeia, and like I said, I think you should do a lot of research before you use it. So I'm just going to talk about positioning right now.
I actually want to show a couple of really quick examples, if that's okay, because I think I picked out a couple examples that I think are going to work really well. This one is from Ajin, which I think is demi-human in English. But we have a couple of examples. We have down here the door is being shut, and it says "pam pam," like on both sides of the door lock. And then on the next page, we have this sort of tense moment as the door opens, and it says "ki." As the door is slowly creaking open. And then we have slightly later on, we have this za in the background as Sato puts on his jacket very dramatically. Yeah, the placement of that in the background makes it look like a big dramatic gesture. So he's not just putting on a jacket, he is putting on a jacket. You know, that's really important. Just the simple placement. It's the same sound effect, but it gives the movement that's happening more emphasis.
Like, for example, if we would do like this is like an action attack or something, by placing the sound effects behind instead. Let's say, I'm just saying this sound effect is do. So this is, I think, ooh, right?
Yes,
yeah. So by placing, like, you see, this actually continues here behind, but we don't see the rest of the this symbol. By placing it behind, it feels like the effect is going so fast, it's going past the sound effect, like just crossing it this way. So you can put sound effects in behind, and that's not as common with American. In when you see Japanese translated as books and you have the English sound effect on top, the reason why you don't see them behind is because usually the English sound effect is a typesetting. It's a font that the editors put on top, or the graphic designers put on top of the pictures, which means when you're an artist, you can incorporate the sound effect in another way. And that's also why I recommend you to think carefully before you do it with Japanese sound effects, because then it's going to be harder. And that's why also it was really hard to take them out when they in the beginning tried to translate Japanese manga without the sound effects, because it's sometimes they are so incorporated in the picture.
Yes.
It's really hard to erase them.
Layers. Use layers, everybody. I cannot stress this enough to use layers. I know it's really tempting to make it a whole part of the artwork. Please don't. You can still make it appear that it's a part of the artwork, but definitely layer your work. It is so important.
And this is especially important when it comes to sound effects, because there's many more reasons to this. If you aim to make your manga international, like I've done with Sword Princess Amalthea have been published in Swedish, English, German, Czech, Italian, and you know what? Boom doesn't work in all languages. It's different in some languages. For example, in the Czech Republican version, the Czech version, I had to remove all the sound effects, because all the sound effects, like if you ever check up, if you Google and check how Czech people write their language, they usually use these kind of like E with a small symbol on top or stuff like that. And those kind of things, I don't have that in my sound effects, but that's important because that's how the sound is in their language. And that's why, like Kae says, it's so important. Don't draw the sound effects in the artwork. Do them digitally later on, or if you work digitally, make sure to work them on a different layer, and keep them separate, because you might want to change them to other languages in the future, Japanese or any other language.
Yeah, there's a very good example with we licensed several German titles for our International Women of Manga line, and I learned this when I was doing some proofreading, some proof editing for one of our titles. But the German word for like staggering or like swaying or stumbling is spelled wank, and obviously wank is an actual German word, but in English, it loses a little bit of its impact that way. And I actually wanted to show something here that I thought was very, very cool, that I think is worth pointing out to people. This is from, I don't think this one has ever been licensed, which is a shame because it's one of my favorite manga. This is from Roto no Monsho, Emblem of Roto. And we have in the very bottom here, we have this like fishy looking dude, and the sound effect at the edge there is surari, like he's sort of like slurping. It's a wet, slow, languid movement. But we then have 2 pages with a lot of action and no sound effects. All of this happens so quickly and so suddenly that there's no sound effect. And the impact of that means that this guy sort of like gets himself to his feet and moves so fast, it's like the world stops. And it's like everything takes part in half a second. And the impact of not having sound effects was huge for that scene. So keep that in mind, that it's not just don't overuse them. Think about the impact of where you're using them. And what kind of effect they're going to have on the reader.
That's a good thing that you're pointing out there. Sound effects is not. It's partly about letting the reader to be in the situation and kind of getting the full emotion, the full perception of the situation or the scenery. They can hear the birds chirping, yada yada. But it's also about being selective with the sound effects. Like if you put in all sounds, it's gonna be a mess. It's gonna be, first of all, really hard to read, because it's like if you, for example, take your microphone and your camera and go out and just film yourself outside, you'll notice that it's going to be hard to hear what you're saying into the camera or into the microphone if a car drives by, or a bird chirps in the tree, or some kids are running by and screaming. And that's pretty much what it is if you put in too much sound effects. So you as the artist needs to be very selective. Which sound effect should I put in, and where and when? So that's a good thing that you mentioned, Kae. Very important to remember that sound effects is about slowing down the reader, making them notice something or take notice of something. So, for example, if we take this kind of hand taking up something, this frame without the sound effect would be very quick. It would be so quick that the reader might skim it over and miss the important thing, that the character picked this thing up. And we want the reader to notice this action happening in this small frame. And that's why I recommend you to add the sound effect when you want the reader to stop and notice something, and then you can speed it up without sound effects when it's not so important. So you can have, for example, a big frame with lots of sound. If the reader was in the scenery, in that environment, there would be a lot of sound. Like maybe it's a park and there is a lot of sound there, but you don't need to add those sounds, because the reader is already stopping on that frame and reading that whole frame and kind of taking it in. So you don't need the sound because they are already there. On the other hand, if you have a quick small frame with a small movement, add a sound effect to make the reader stop there. And also, like you say, add the sound effects, for example. That's why sound effects are usually added when you have, for example, action scenes, because scenes can become you can skim them through pretty quickly because there's not much dialogue, or you don't want to add dialogue too much in an action scene, because it's weird that they start speaking while they're doing actions. So you want to keep the dialogue low, but to make the reader actually stop on the action scene, you can add sound effects if you want to. Or you can, as you showed in your example, just not use them. So that's also a choice, whether you want the action scene to be slow or quick. Yeah. And about and also about the techniques, as there's different techniques for doing sound effects. We have, of course, one technique is to just have a very thick brush and do a sound effect like ka or ka in English. You can even make the sides of the lines straight instead, to get a more kind of hard feeling, like compared to the soft side, the soft edges. If you cut off all the edges and make them straight, it will feel more strong or hard. So this is a more soft. This is soft sound, and this is hard, depending on if the edges are straight or rounded. So that's one way. Another way is to have a thinner brush like this one, and you just do the outlines. You draw, for example, the outlines instead of the lettering. That's very common in Japanese manga. And you can even do that if you want to make it a little bit shaky. You can do it twice. Like you can do double lines like this instead. And that's another way to make another emotional, like make the sound effect feel a little bit emotional, like ka. This is a more like shaky ka, or something is like like pounding or shaking or something like that. That's another way. One more way to do sound effects is to have to use your pen pressure, either on your pen on the paper, or when you're using a program, you can use pen pressure to kind of do the lines uneven like this. So, for example, if we have the sound effect do, we can have like this. That is one way to make it feel more like a sound effect. It feels more like artistic, and you can also do that with double lines to make it even more artistic or like an effect of the sound effects. So this is one way. Another way is, for example, to have a shadow. So, for example, if you do the do in English like this, do like this, or in English it would probably be like boom or something. So let's write boom like this. And then you can just add the shadow behind. So by adding the shadow below like this, for example, you also create a feeling of a strength in the sound effect. So this is a good way to add some strength to the words, to feel like it's a harder boom, a bigger boom than just a small boom. So it's all about like, is this a strong sound or small sound? Like, for example, if it's just like if you say whoosh or swish, you can maybe do it like this in English. Swish. You make it like shaky lines or fast lines, and you can do the same in Japanese. That would be, for example, like the one you showed, za, for example. That would be
I have another excellent example here that I pulled up from perennial favorite, One Punch Man. Excellent manga. We have a big punch coming in. Gah!
Yes!
It's coming right in. And, of course, our One Punch Man, Saitama, punches back, and we have DOM! And then, in the very next page, it's faded in the bottom. Bish!
Yeah.
And it's just so faded, it's almost invisible on the page as he just crumbles. And that's just 3 back-to-back movements, all with different impact because they were all written slightly differently.
Yeah. And this is, for example, this is Po. As you can see, if you use, for example, a digital program, you can even, in Clip Studio Paint, you can free transform it, and then you can even, I like this a lot to kind of use it to make it a little bit more dynamic or 3D effect, kind of, or like it's kind of bulging to one side or kind of like this. That's another way, I think, and that's why I like about digital programs, is that you can do this. You can kind of twist and turn and deform your sound effects. So that's one way. Let's do that again. Wait. Free transform, and let's do it on the other side like this. Yeah, okay. So now you can see that it feels like there's a depth.
Going along that line there. The crowd. Ooh.
Yeah.
They're all like, oh, damn, did he just say that? But you've got that cool little, like, rippling effect going along with it, and that's exactly the kind of thing you can do with a digital program. I think this was done by hand. This is a very old manga. But yeah, it's a similar concept there. You can do that very, very easily. I find it interesting. We actually have Two Frame Studios saying, yes, One Punch Man does use sound effects so well. One Punch Man is I really highly recommend it as just a very, very solid manga. The story is great, but Murata is clearly very good at combining the incredible drama and then just the dumb humor, the dumb, stupid jokes in it. Like, we have Saitama got punched and just Giro, which is like glance. And it's just so stupid. It's so stupid. But yes, it uses excellent sound effects. But one thing that Two Frames is saying here, they never put that much thought into sound effects because they could never read them in Japanese. And I understand that. I think a lot of people don't give sound effects the props. They don't think about how important they are for a scene, and a truly, truly good manga will weave them into the scene So you read them automatically as you're looking at the art, and you really just sort of, they help. Yeah. They're as important as the art is in setting the stage for what's going on.
Yeah. I think one thing, for example, that you can remember is that if you want to use Japanese sound effects, and you know it's going to be read by an English-speaking person as well, try to combine the English and the Japanese. I know it's going to be kind of layer on layer, but it's because you're going to lose a lot of readers. And sound effects, the reason why you have sound effects is because you want the reader to, like I said, stop, kind of taking the situation or taking the emotion or feeling of the situation. And so it is kind of removing part of the comics, kind of the whole story, the narrative, if you take away the sound effects. So that's why, for example, if this was a sound effect, this is like paw, or maybe I should do it bo instead, but anyway, this is paw. I don't know what paw would be, but I know that bo would be something else. So I'm gonna change this to, let's see, let's change this to bo instead. Bo. And this line here, this long line that I draw, this is common in this one here. This is common in Japanese manga that you use to kind of elongate a sound. So it's bo, it's a long bo. And what I do if I want to add the English speaking sound effects together with this, because it might be because I want to publish it in both languages, then actually just draw the English one below, like this one, for example. Maybe it would be boo, like this. And that you could actually combine them pretty cool. Like you could make them into, like you can see, this actually works as an element in itself. So you can actually make the sound effects work together. And that way a Japanese person could understand it and just skip the boom, and an English speaking person could skip the Japanese sound effects and just read the boom. And someone who can read both would be annoyed but could understand both. I mean, it might be annoying for someone who can read both, but for most people they won't. I think most people will only understand one of them, most of the reader, or a lot of the readers. So that's one way to incorporate. But if you want to do just English speaking, you could do it. It's exact same way. If you have a frame, think about, like, if it's an action frame, the same frame we had before with the hand and the action attack like this. You can still put the if we have, like, for example, the whoosh, for example, we put a whoosh behind. We can put the whoosh behind it like this if you want to, like this, for example. Whoosh. We have a sound effect behind the attack. You can do the same thing that you did with the Japanese sound effects. So think the same way. I think that's why when you read manga and you do the references, if you choose to do the words in English instead or in your native language, make sure you can still copy the style of the art, like how they, like what we talked before about how to do different soft and hard, and white or black, and outlined or not. This kind of aesthetics, you can use the same for both Western lettering and Japanese lettering. So that's pretty much the tip, to reference, not you don't have to reference the Japanese characters, but the techniques and the style of the characters.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That was awesome. So much great advice there. As always. Thank you so much for joining us again, Natalia. Thank you guys for tuning in again and for dealing with our considerable technical issues that we had this time around. We will hopefully have everything together next week, so we won't be going through this again. As always, if you come up with any questions that we didn't get to in this class, please send an email to kae@tokyopop.com. That's KAE@tokyopop.com. And I will make sure that either myself or Natalia can answer for you. You can also go to, thank you, Natalia. You can also go to tokyopop.com/ Manga Masterclass to see all the previous episodes, to see the cool little sketches. We're going to put up something explaining about the great exercises that Natalia came up with today. As always, your best study guide is going to be the manga on your shelf. And, use as many resources as you can. I think you don't have to copy them, but you will learn a lot from them. And of course, the most important thing here, the whole point in this masterclass is to have you guys create your own manga. So going back from episode 1, we're taking you every step of the process to make your own comic. What we would love is for you guys to make your own short comics. Keep them short. Don't aim for like a 72 volume copy of Bleach. We're looking for a very short little manga story. And we will be holding a contest at the end of these classes. We will pick a lucky winner who will get to have a Zoom portfolio review with Natalia. She will go over your comic. She will sort of give you some pointers. She'll tell you where you're really strong, where you need to do some improvements. You will get this incredible advice from a professional published manga creator. And then we will pick out some other winners, and we will be giving you some TOKYOPOP manga for free. So definitely stay tuned. We will announce the contest as we're drawing to the end of the classes. And we will see you again in 2 weeks for episode 9.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you so
Well,
much
thank you so
for
much,
joining.
Everyone. Yeah, thank you. And thanks again, Natalia. And we will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye, guys.